Right, we begin here in Africa's largest economy. President Tinubu has signed into law the student loan bill. The student loan bill is sponsored by the Speaker of the 9th House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, passed the third reading at the House 2 weeks ago. The law is to provide easy access to higher education for indigent Nigerians through interest-free loans from the Nigerian Education Loan Fund. President Tinubu's aide, Dele Alake, made the announcement at the State House.
And that students' loans bill, you all know what it entails, what it connotes, the meaning. This is a promise made during the presidential campaign by the then candidate, His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu, that he will bring back the issue of the student loans issue onto the front burner. And today, that promise he made has been kept.
A bill tells you what should be done. The how of it will be done is what we are going to put together. And the good luck is that we have experience already in this area. We already have a federal scholarship board scheme running. But the difference this bill makes is that it's going to be a loans board so that people that don't even have, for whatever reason, don't qualify could be able to apply for a loan.
All right, let's get into it. Joining us now from our Abuja studios, Senator Lanre Tejuoso, who is the Pro-Chancellor, Governing Council Chair at UNILAG, University of Lagos, and Professor Joseph Nnanna, Chief Economist at the Development Bank of Nigeria. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Professor Nnanna, let me start with you. What do you think of the bill? And does the Development Bank of Nigeria do anything in education, for example, by funding SMEs in the education sector?
Thanks for having me, Rodis. Well, to be honest with you, the bill is a welcomed news for Nigerians all over the country, especially those who have less access to finance for education. As we know, access to finance is a challenge as it is, but having this bill, now a law, is a welcome surprise for the citizenry. But to be sure, DBN, I can tell you that we are a wholesale bank and we do intervene and push out funds to the private sector through our commercial banks and microfinance banks for onward lending to micro, small, and medium enterprises in this ecosystem. As of today, while our loans have been around 632 billion since inception till date, we have pushed out roughly 3% of that towards education. Keep in mind now, we're financing banks who will now lend to SMEs who are in that space. So we would encourage more SMEs to come into that space, whether it's from a training perspective or whether it's from a vocational skills perspective. Ultimately, we believe that greater finance to access remains a challenge, and we are here to be a catalyst to improve the overall sentiments around access to finance for MSMEs. The bill in question is actually a good one. The law, is really a good one. The truth of the matter is this: I would hope that when the law is now being implemented, that the students who are applying for it will apply through their schools, and the funding will go directly to the schools and crediting the students' accounts. That way, there's no misappropriation of those funds. I'll pause there.
Thank you so much, Professor. Senator Tejuoso, Dr. Tejuoso, Pro-Chancellor Tejuoso. There's so many titles I can use for you today, sir. Thank you for joining us. It looks like the federal government intends to wean itself off funding of public universities for tuition. When you look at the taxes that will fund this exercise, are they sustainable, Senator?
First of all, I will welcome the guests, citizenry of Nigeria, and you. Thank you, Rotus. We need to identify what we mean by tuition, because, for example, in the University of Lagos, when we give the bill to the students, we do not say tuition. We just give them different bills of ID cards, laboratory services, medical services, library services, and so on. And then we call it tuition free. But the law now says tuition is the only funding that the federal government will cater for. So that one, we need to address that at a later date with the National Assembly. In terms of sustainability of this fund, I believe it is very well mapped out because it says 1% of the profit of the oil services, NNPC, 1% of the profit for all mineral resources, which I believe should run into at least 200 billion, judging from what we had in 2022. Then we now have also 1% of the taxes paid into FIRS, 1% of the taxes paid into the customs, and 1% of the taxes paid into the immigration services. So for FIRS, 2022, they had about 10.1 trillion naira as their revenue. The custom services in 2022, they had about 2.6 trillion. And the immigration services had about 70 billion. So all put together, we have about 13.4 trillion naira put together as the revenue for 2022. So if we talk about 1% of that, we are talking about 134 billion naira. So 134 billion naira plus the other accommodation we're going to get from gifts, donations, and education fund, endowment funds, and so on, we should talk about maybe 500 billion every year. I believe this is sustainable because it's every year that the FIRS will always have revenue. It's every year that the immigration, customs will always have revenue. So I think it's sustainable. And of course, we'll have oil and mineral revenue every year. So it's sustainable.
All right, thank you, Senator Tejuoso. Professor Nnanna, let me come back to you. So repayment is to begin 2 years after youth service. This has been debated a bit. Looking at our unemployment figures, particularly for youth unemployment, which is, as of last count, 54%. Do you think that's an incentive for the government to create an environment that is conducive for job growth so people can find jobs to pay back the loans?
I think you hit the nail on the head, Rodis. It is an incentive right now for the government to create an atmosphere for job creation, especially for the youth unemployment leg, which you've alluded to is around 50% or climbing. But the truth of the matter is this: the 2-year period for repayment, in my humble opinion, is not enough. Why? Because right now, as it stands, the unemployment level is very high and the job creation level still remains low. The number of jobs being created is not enough, and the number of people coming into the labor market outpaces the job supply. Consequently, in my estimation, I would imagine there should be different mechanisms for repayment, meaning maybe a forbearance period, maybe you a way of income-based repayment. So you pay as you go. You shouldn't put a caveat there, begin payment or 10% of your income or 10% of your profits for an SME, as the case may be, towards the now, the unemployment level. I read somewhere it's a 500,000 naira threshold eligibility requirement for you to access those loans. The minimum wage right now is not even 40,000 naira a month. Consequently, most households won't be able to even qualify based on that criteria. So maybe it's important to look back and take a step back to say, let's reduce the eligibility requirements for people to access credit for education, not giving the credits to the students per se, but to the universities and crediting in the students' accounts, one. Then two, in terms of repayment, they should be different mechanisms. One, we say forbearance. Two, maybe income-based repayment. Three, maybe if you do some service to the armed forces and so on, after a time period in the future, your loans get forgiven and so on. Maybe those are different strategies we can use or embed within the current law as established. I'll pause there.
Thank you, Professor Nnanna. Pro-Chancellor Tejuoso, what's your take? I want you to also weigh in there on that criteria, the payback period, the job market, and so on.
First of all, we need to actually understand this new law for you to be able to really talk about what the consequences are. First of all, the students that are going to be eligible for these loans, there's one prerequisite, there's a requirement, that is they must have a letter of admission. So what the law is saying is this opportunity is for new students that will come in with their letter of admission. So what we are talking about is any new student that comes in today, before he can seek employment, it will take another 5 years. That's assuming it's 3 years for your university, then 1 year for youth corps, and then 2 years later. In fact, it's about 6 years. So before we start talking about repayment, for the first 6 years, the government is giving something like a grant. It's not a loan. Well, of course, after 6 years, they will start paying back. So I believe that should be one aspect the government must take serious, because for 6 years, there's no repayment back into the fund. So we know now that the new students that will come in even next year after the first set of students will also be enjoying new funding, that we haven't had any repayment from the first set of students that will get the loan. So we need to get the government ready to fund this particular project for the next 6 years at least without any refund. So then in terms of the refund is not by the student, it's by the employer. So it's the employer that will be ready to pay back the government. So therefore, the government, if they want any refund, they must create the employment. Because if there's no employer, the students will not pay a dime back. Because the law says the employer must put in 10% of the salary of that student when he starts work. So it is really the employer and the government that they must put their books in order and put their plan in order to ensure they are available to pay back the government. So I think everything is well planned, at least not burdening the students on this project. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator Tejuoso. Professor Nnanna, let me come back to you. Still on the matter of funding, you mentioned that Development Bank of Nigeria disbursing that 631 or so billion to SMEs. I think the figure says about 313,000 last year, 31% climb compared to 2021. I think it was 482 billion to about 208,000 SMEs. I guess if you break that down, you're looking at about 2 million per SME. Is that enough? And do you plan to do more in 2023? And with what you've disbursed, are those loans or grants?
Okay, Lotus, thanks for the question. So, what we've done so far is quite commendable, but we're just one organization in the DFI space. Keep in mind, there are multiple organizations within the DFI space doing similar interventions within the MSME ecosystem. We are always welcome to see an improvement in loans given to individuals and businesses, but ultimately it boils down to, because we're a wholesale organization, so it boils down to the commercial banks and the microfinance banks to actually create this risk assets. To be sure, when we take a look at what the DBN has done so far, I will tell you, it's taken a tall order for us to get to this point. Look at the macroeconomic situation of the country. Inflation is sticky up, 22% and climbing. Exchange rate volatility remains. So manufacturers and SMEs broadly have difficult time sourcing for FX to buy their equipments and so on into the country. So those are challenges in itself. Manufacturers Association of Nigeria will tell you the problems they're facing with FX. But beyond that, if we take a look at the overall macroeconomic fundamentals of the country, we know the challenging environment. Consequently, it is harder for MSMEs to get access to credit because banks right now are probably going to be taking a wait and see approach because of the situation we find ourselves in. But notwithstanding, the DBN is there as a final leg just to ensure we're a catalyst to ensure other banks are pushing out funds to ensure that MSMEs are not left in a worse off situation. We remember the Naira redesign that affected households and MSME broadly. So if we know that caused at least maybe a pause in operation of these businesses, now they have to jumpstart, reposition, re-strategize, and begin to grow again. That takes time, especially as you know, MSMEs have a lower savings propensity. So if you're taking a look at all that, you can easily see that on average, most micro businesses, they need less than ₦1 million to just run their business to start off with. But as they grow, they will need more and more access to finance. That's why we have come in to provide that access. But if you take a look at the numbers, you will see where the money has actually gone to. I, as the chief economist, we go do spot checks to demonstrate that, hey, if money has gone through this bank to these SME companies, we will follow the money and ensure it's being used, and we'll tell a story of how the money has helped them or perhaps hurt them. So I don't know. I think for me, we can do more, but what we have done so far is commendable given that we started just 5 years ago. So we're the youngest DFI in the country, and we've been able to do this. That, to me, should be commendable. I'll pause there.
All right, thank you for that. Dr. Tejuoso, let me come back to you. Speaking of following the money, on the loan requirements, what do you make of that 500,000 naira income threshold for a year? I think if you break it down, it comes out to about 41,000 a month to qualify for the student loans. What do you make of it in your estimate?
Well, in the last 24 hours, a few people I've spoken with, it seems they don't even understand what the 500,000 means. What it means is that any family or household that does not have income more than 500,000 qualifies for this loan. So now we are talking about a minimum wage with that calculation of 41,000 naira per month. Now the minimum wage is 30,000. So we have to go and amend that law with the proposed increase in the minimum wage. So at the end of the day, I believe it will be any household that has household income of 1 million. That's if we increase the minimum wage by 100%. Then it is anyone below 100 million that is eligible for the loan. And that is the same thing with individuals. Because the way it is now, in the University of Lagos, for example, we ensure that every student must also have a qualification in skill acquisition. Because we want them to come out and just not be looking for jobs. They too should become an employer of labor. So whilst they are having the opportunity to get jobs, they also have the opportunity to be an employer. So any graduate from University of Lagos will also have one skill that he can use to start his own business. And then the government will not be looking for just an employer outside to pay back their money. This student will also, whilst waiting for a job, will have a skill acquisition service that he will offer to Nigerians. So that is definitely the way to go this time. We should reduce the pressure on them to seek jobs, but pressure for them to be employers and also be people that will have employees under them. So that's what I believe all other universities in Nigeria should embrace, and will ensure that Nigeria is filled with skill-acquired businesses all over the country. Then being an employer looking for jobs will reduce immensely.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Senator. I want to come back to you, Professor Nnanna. I actually want both of you to comment on this. What do you make of the fine of 2 years imprisonment punishment of 2 year imprisonment or a fine of 500,000 or both if a default happens? It seems to be they're targeting students or individuals who would go out of their way to take the money and use it for something else. Because I imagine if you can't find a job, or if you already had a job and you were paying the loan and you lost the job, you would default. That doesn't mean you go to jail. So what do you, Professor Nnanna, let me start with you. What do you make of that, that penalty there?
Well, I think the penalty is a bit harsh, but I also do believe, though, that for a penalty to come down this harsh would mean that means the students are literally trying to avoid repayment. And if they're gainfully employed, like the Pro-Chancellor said, essentially the employers are the ones responsible from deducting it from the individual's salary and make repayment back to the government to to support the repayment of the loans of that student or the former student, as the case may be. But the truth of the matter is this. Governments all over the world, their job is not to create jobs. Government's responsibility is to create an enabling environment whereby jobs can actually be created by the private sector. So, for example, President Tinubu signed into law the Electricity Act, which I believe is a game changer in that sector. I sincerely believe more jobs will be created based on that law. I believe that. Similarly, if we have more of these types of pro-business interventions, my suspicion is unemployment should gradually reduce. So if that happens, then when we get to a level of full employment in the country, then I would imagine more and more people will have job opportunities and will be more willing to repay. But the truth of the matter is, if right now unemployment is over 50% for youth in particular, then this, in my humble opinion, is more, the spirit of the law is good, but the implementation is where the rubber really meets the road. And my challenge with harsh penalty, there are no jobs. So why penalize people if they're trying to avoid repayment when it's the institution they work for responsible for repaying? I'll pause there.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor Nnanna. Senator Tejuoso, where do you weigh in on that penalty? How do you see it?
I believe the penalty is okay because where there is no law, there's no sin. And where there's no sin, there's no law. First of all, the students are not the ones that will be penalized because the law stipulates that it is the employer that must pay the government 10% of their salary. So it's the employer that should be penalized if they do not, they actually pay the student the salary and they do not remit the 10% to the government. So the employer should be the one that will make sure they regulate themselves, that they pay. Because if you don't pay the student, he has nothing to pay the government. And the student is not the one to grab the money from the employer. So the employer will be the one to pay for it. So I believe that law is very, very okay. And most importantly, laws are made by human beings for human beings. The judge to interpret the law will listen to the employer. And if he has a good reason as to why he could not pay, the judge will decide if that penalty should be fulfilled 10% or 100%. But we need, the way human beings are in this world, not only Nigeria, they need to have a kind of penalty that will keep them on their toes to ensure that they do the right thing. So, especially in Nigeria, we need penalties to ensure we do the right thing. So, I believe that's okay.
All right. And Professor Nnanna, let me come back to you. We're wrapping up soon. Only got a few minutes to go. I want you both to, I guess, share your thoughts on where we are 15 days into this new administration. The stock market jumped today, following the removal of the CBN governor. That's the NGX here. It popped for a second time. First time it popped was after inauguration. But looking at what the president has done so far, the removal of fuel subsidies, removal of the CBN governor, and now signing this law, or signing this bill into law now. What's your assessment of the administration 2 weeks in? Professor Nnanna, I'll start with you.
Okay, thanks for the question, Rodas. So far, I think the president has done a commendable job in his first couple of weeks in office. He has demonstrated he has the courage to act. He has demonstrated that he is willing to take the bull by the horn and take some tough decisions. In my mind, I feel as though the electricity bill that became law is a good one. This student loan law is also a good one. So in the first few days or first few weeks, I think he's off to a good start. So we'll see the next 100 days, the next year, and the next 4 years and so on. Can the momentum continue? We hope so. By and large, I think ultimately the markets will respond to different noise, if you will, and what the market says ultimately will determine what the animal spirit within individuals will end up doing. I sincerely believe that so far, he's off to a good start. I would say that.
Thank you, Professor Nnanna. Senator Tejuoso, what's your assessment on the first 15 days?
I want to be top of philosophical for this. You know, when you wake up in the morning and you look out of your window and you see the clouds gathering, you know what the day will be like. For this government, I looked out of the window. I am seeing some very good cloud, because the beginning is always very important. When I was in the Senate 2015 to 2019, in 2016, the Senate, most of the time, they were talking about the past government and what they did negatively. And in most cases, it had to do with central bank releasing this or central bank not doing that. So I got up on this, the floor of the Senate on that day, and I said, look, we can't keep on talking about what the Senate did. And we still have the same leadership in the Senate, in the CBN. Because, I mean, in any government institution or even in private business, leadership is all that matters. If you are still complaining that CBN did this during the last government and you still maintain the same leadership, there is no way you can have any change. And exactly that is what has happened. So between that 2016 and today, 2023, that leadership continued. So we got the results, and now it's even bigger. So what President Tinubu is doing now is a very, very welcome start, because you have to start from the leadership. Once the leadership is right, everything else will be right, going downwards. So, I mean, like I said, expect very beautiful rain, because I can see very beautiful cloud gathering.
Okay, and maybe also a rainbow as well. All right, we can still squeeze at least one more minute out of the both of you. Can you, Professor, let me come back to you. Can you talk about the importance of the cabinet? I mean, we're going to get the cabinet soon. What kind of clues do you think that cabinet will give us? What are you optimistic about that, and what the path that the cabinet charts, if you can, quickly in about 30 seconds?
You see, it's a Herculean task ahead. The president has said he wants to ensure interest rates come down. He wants to unify exchange rates and essentially be pro-business in the process of doing all of this. That's a mouthful, if you will. And it's a difficult task to achieve all these things. And historically, Nigeria has been plagued with strong men and women and weak institutions. Right now, we need a cabinet that has square pegs in square holes. In my mind, the president will have to select a crack team of individuals, strong technocrats, people who know their salt. And once he does this, I'm confident that we will now see a reformation of institutions. That way, we can checkmate any strong personality in these institutions circumventing policies that are already existing. So in my mind, the setup of the cabinet has to be high caliber individuals with high KPIs, high deliverables, and willing to go the extra mile for the people. Because ultimately, if the people aren't feeling the effects of the policies, the processes, the regulations, then guess what? We have failed as a country. And to be sure, I sincerely believe that the presidency will select a strong team around him who will deliver on his mandate. It's not going to be easy. There will be pain along the way. We're already feeling it right now. But my hope and aspirations for the country is it will be well at the end of the tenure. I'll pause there.
Senator Tejuoso, I'll give you the last word, your expectations and how you feel the cabinet, the importance of the Tinubu cabinet when we get it.
Yes, any spiritually minded person in this country, if you look at the history of the president from 1999 to date, you can see there's nothing he touches that doesn't succeed. So you can see that there's someone behind him that is making things happen positively. Okay, even in 1999, during the government, he was the only governor standing. All the elections he's ever had is always successful. So you cannot fight with God. God is doing something in this man's life. So let us tap into what he's doing and his anointing. He is doing everything positive. No matter all the obstacles, challenges we are seeing left and right, they are just stones being thrown whilst he's moving to the target. So let us keep on praying that the God that has brought him this far will take him to that limit that Nigeria needs to be. I want to go to bed and just, anything I think of maybe last week, I will see him doing it the week after. So I believe God is with him. So who can fight God? Who wants to fight God should fight him. I think is the man for the moment for Nigeria. God bless Nigeria.
All right, we'll end on that positive note. Our deep thanks to Senator Lanre Tejuoso, Pro-Chancellor, Governing Chair at University of Lagos. Thank you, sir. And Professor Joseph Nnanna, Chief Economist at the Development Bank of Nigeria. Gentlemen, thank you both. We appreciate your time.